The stars looked different from the bridge of the eternal horizon. Captain Han Jiho stood with his hands behind his back, watching the vast emptiness of space. His ship was Earth's finest, a symbol of humanity's reach into the galaxy. But today that reach had brought them face to face with something far greater than themselves. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission," said Lieutenant Kang Mirai from her station. Her fingers moved quickly across the controls. "It's from the Valthari fleet," Jiho nodded. The Valthari Empire controlled dozens of star systems. Their ships were massive, their technology far beyond anything humans had created. When the Eternal Horizon entered neutral space 3 days ago, the Valthari had been waiting. They said it was a coincidence. Jiho didn't believe in coincidences. "Put it on screen," he said. The view screen flickered to life. A tall alien appeared, his skin a deep purple, his eyes like pools of silver. He wore armor that seemed to glow with its own light. This was High Commander Velthar, leader of the Valthari military forces in this sector. "Human vessel," Velthar said, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "You have been granted permission to observe our exercises. We trust you will learn much from what you see." There was no warmth in his words, only pride. Jiho kept his face neutral. "We are honored by the invitation, High Commander. Earth sends its gratitude." Velthar's expression didn't change. "Tomorrow we will demonstrate our capabilities. Perhaps you would like to show us your own weapons? It would be educational." The transmission ended before Jiho could respond. Mirai turned in her chair, her jaw tight. "That was an insult, Captain. They want to mock us in front of their fleet." "I know," Jiho said quietly, "but we'll accept their invitation. Prepare our weapons for demonstration." Aboard the Valthari flagship, Princess Ashira watched the same transmission from the observation deck. She was the third heir to the throne, sent here to learn about military matters. Her father believed she spent too much time with books and science. He wanted her to understand power, but Ashira wasn't interested in power. She was interested in understanding, and these humans fascinated her. "What do you think of them, Princess?" asked one of her guards. "I think we should not judge them so quickly," she said, her eyes on the human ship. It was small compared to Valthari vessels, built with simple metals and basic designs, yet something about it felt purposeful, efficient. The next day, both fleets gathered in open space. The Valthari formed a perfect line, their ships gleaming like jewels against the black. The Eternal Horizon floated alone, small and plain. Jiho stood on his bridge with his crew around him. "Lieutenant Mirai, you have the demonstration?" "Yes, Captain," she said. "We'll show them our railguns, missile systems, and one small nuclear warhead. Nothing classified." "Good, let's begin." The Eternal Horizon fired first. A railgun shot burst from the ship. A solid piece of metal accelerated to incredible speed. It struck a distant asteroid and shattered it into pieces. Then came the missiles, streaking through space with chemical propellant, their warheads exploding in bright flashes. Finally, a small nuclear device detonated far from both fleets, its light blooming like a tiny sun. On the Valthari flagship, the command deck erupted in laughter. "Did you see that?" one officer said, barely containing his amusement. "They throw rocks." "Like children with slings." Another joined in. "And those explosions." "So crude, so wasteful." "They burn chemicals in the void." High Commander Velthar smiled, though it looked more like a sneer. "These are the weapons of primitives. I have seen species barely out of their caves with better technology." But Princess Ashira didn't laugh. She watched the data carefully, her mind processing what she saw. The railgun had perfect accuracy. The missiles had covered distance with surprising speed, and that nuclear explosion, though small, had released an enormous amount of energy from a very simple device. She touched her data pad, recording everything. There was something here, something the others weren't seeing. "Now, humans," Velthar's voice boomed across the communication channel. "Allow us to show you real weapons." A Valthari cruiser moved forward. From its bow, a lance of pure plasma shot forth, so bright it seemed to tear reality itself. It struck an asteroid 10 times larger than the one the humans had hit. The rock didn't shatter. It simply vanished, turned to vapor in an instant. Then the Valthari demonstrated their shields. They invited the humans to fire at their smallest ship. Mirai launched 3 missiles. Each one exploded harmlessly against the energy barrier, unable to even touch the hull. The Valthari officers cheered. The humans remained silent. Jiho felt the weight of humiliation settle on his shoulders. But he kept his voice steady when he opened the channel. An impressive display, High Commander. Your technology is truly advanced. Technology? Velthar laughed. No, Captain. This is civilization. Perhaps in a few thousand years your people will reach this level. Until then, stay in your small corner of space. The transmission ended. The Velthari fleet began to disperse, their exercises complete. They had made their point clear. Humans were nothing. Their weapons were jokes. Their presence in space was tolerated only because the Velthari found them amusing. On the eternal horizon, the crew sat in heavy silence. Dr. Yoon Hajin, the ship's physicist, finally spoke. Captain, they don't understand. Understand what? Jiho asked. Our weapons aren't designed to be impressive, Hajin said. They're designed to work. To be reliable. To be built by the millions when we need them. The Velthari have never fought a real war. Not against equals. They don't know what war actually means. Mirai nodded slowly. Their plasma weapons are beautiful. But beauty doesn't win battles. And those shields, they'd be useless against a sustained kinetic assault. Perhaps, Jiho said. But that's not our concern today. Log everything we learned. We came here to observe, and we observed plenty. Across the void, Princess Ashira sat alone in her quarters. Her datapad glowed in the darkness, filled with numbers and calculations. She ran the simulations again and again. Every time the results troubled her more. The human weapons were simple, brutally simple. But simplicity had advantages. Their railguns had no complicated power systems to fail. Their missiles needed no exotic materials. Their nuclear warheads were just metal and physics. And then she found the records. Buried in the galactic database were fragments of human history. She began to read about their wars. Not wars against aliens, wars against themselves. Her hand trembled as she scrolled through the data. Thousands of years of continuous warfare. Weapons that evolved specifically to kill other humans. Technologies born from desperation and refined through rivers of blood. The Velthari had fought primitive species. Easy conquests against those with no real defense. But humans had fought humans. Equal against equal. Smart against smart. Desperate against desperate. She closed the datapad and looked out at the stars. Tomorrow she would try to speak with her superiors. She would warn them that these humans were not what they seemed. But deep in her heart she already knew they wouldn't listen. The Velthari were too proud. Too certain of their superiority. And that certainty, she feared, would cost them dearly. Ambassador Lee So-hee arrived at the Velthari Council Station 3 weeks after the weapons demonstration. She carried with her the hopes of Earth, proposals for trade agreements, and requests for scientific exchange. What she received instead was polite dismissal. Your application for Galactic Community membership has been reviewed, said Councillor Drath, his silver eyes barely glancing at the human woman before him. The Council finds that humanity does not yet meet the technological requirements. So-hee kept her composure, though anger burned beneath her calm exterior. May I ask what specific requirements we failed to meet? All of them, Drath said simply. Your faster-than-light travel is crude. Your weapons are primitive. Your society is too fractured, too violent. Perhaps in another century we will reconsider. The meeting ended quickly. So-hee returned to the eternal horizon with empty hands and bitter news. Captain Jiho received her report in his ready room, his expression unreadable. They're making a mistake, he said quietly. Yes, So-hee agreed. But it's their mistake to make. We can't force them to see us differently. While diplomacy failed in the council chambers, something else was happening in the lower decks of the Velthari flagship. Princess Ashira had requested and received permission to study human technology more closely. Her superiors granted the request because they thought it was harmless. What could she possibly learn from inferior machines? Everything, as it turned out. Engineer Park Dae-hyun welcomed the princess aboard the Eternal Horizon with cautious respect. He didn't trust the Velthari, but orders were orders. Captain Jiho wanted to maintain good relations even if the aliens saw humans as lesser beings. This is our weapons bay, Dae-hyun said, leading Ashira through the metal corridors. Not very fancy compared to your ships, I'm sure. Ashira studied everything with intense focus. She touched the railgun assembly, felt the weight of a missile casing, examined the simple mechanical systems that loaded and fired the weapons. Why do you use such basic designs? She asked. Dae-hyun thought for a moment. Because basic designs don't fail. Look, we could probably build something fancier, something with more power. But what happens when that fancy system breaks in the middle of a battle? With our weapons, if one part fails, we can replace it quickly. If we run out of ammunition, we can make more with simple materials. You designed for sustainability, Ashira said, understanding dawning in her eyes. Not for maximum power. Exactly. We learned that the hard way. How? Dahyun's expression darkened. Through wars, princess. Thousands of years of wars. We learned that the army with the best weapons doesn't always win. Sometimes the army that can keep fighting the longest wins. Later that day, Ashira met with Dr. Hajin in his laboratory. The physicist had prepared a presentation, though he wasn't sure why the alien princess wanted to know about human military history. You have to understand, Hajin began. Humans didn't develop weapons to fight aliens. We developed them to fight each other. He showed her images from Earth's past. Ancient warriors with swords and spears. Medieval armies with crossbows and cannons. Modern soldiers with rifles and tanks. Each generation building on the last. Each war teaching new lessons written in blood. Your species fights amongst itself? Ashira asked, though she already knew the answer from her research. We used to fight a lot, Hajin said carefully. Wars between nations, between religions, between ideologies. We nearly destroyed ourselves several times. Nuclear weapons almost ended our species before we even reached space. He pulled up more data, the world wars, the nuclear standoffs, the countless smaller conflicts that raged across Earth's surface throughout history. Ashira felt something cold settle in her chest. How many died in these wars? Hundreds of millions, Hajin said quietly. Maybe more. It's hard to count. And these weapons we saw demonstrated, they come from this history? Every single one. Our railguns were developed because we learned that simple kinetic energy never fails. Our missiles exist because we needed weapons that could think for themselves, reach targets we couldn't see. Our nuclear warhead, he paused. Those were born from the darkest period of our history, when we were so afraid of each other that we built weapons to destroy entire cities. Ashira returned to the Valthari flagship that evening with her mind spinning. She locked herself in her quarters and began writing a detailed report. But as she wrote, she realized how it would sound to her superiors. They would think she had been deceived, that the humans had told her lies to make themselves seem more dangerous than they were. She needed proof, hard data that couldn't be dismissed. For the next 2 weeks, Ashira dove into the Galactic database, pulling every scrap of information about human history. She found records from exploration probes that had observed Earth from orbit. She found radio transmissions that had leaked into space decades before humans achieved faster-than-light travel. She found everything, and what she found terrified her. The humans had weaponized everything. Chemistry became poison gas and explosive compounds. Biology became diseases designed to target specific populations. Physics became nuclear bombs and electromagnetic pulses. They had even weaponized information itself, creating systems to deceive and manipulate each other during conflicts. But what disturbed her most was the realization that every human weapon had a counter. Because humans had spent so long fighting humans, they knew exactly how to defeat their own technology. For every weapon, there was a defense. For every defense, a weapon that could penetrate it. The Valthari had never needed such complexity. Their wars had been simple. Arrive at a primitive world, demonstrate overwhelming power, accept surrender. They had refined their plasma lances and energy shields to perfection, because nothing had ever challenged them. Ashira ran simulations on her computer. She input Valthari ship designs and weapons. Then she input human weapon systems. The simulations were theoretical, of course, but the results made her hands shake. In a direct confrontation, the Valthari would win easily. Their shields and advanced technology would overwhelm human forces in any fair fight. But war was never fair. And humans, she was beginning to understand, had spent thousands of years learning how to make war unfair in their favor. She found records of human tactics. Guerrilla warfare, asymmetric combat, strategies where the weaker force defeated the stronger through patience, deception, and willingness to pay any price for victory. The Valthari had never faced an enemy like that. A message interrupted her research. Border colonies were reporting strange attacks. An unknown species was hitting settlements on the edge of Valthari space. The reports were confused, but the damage was real. Ships were being destroyed. Colonies were going silent. High Commander Velthar called an emergency meeting. Ashira attended, her mind still full of human history and simulations. We have identified the attackers, Velthar announced, bringing up an image. The creature on the screen was horrifying. All chitin and claws like an insect grown to massive size. They call themselves the Krell, a swarm species. They appeared in our space 6 days ago and have been attacking ever since. What do our forces report? Asked one of the military advisors. Velthar's expression was troubled. Our plasma lances seem less effective than expected. And the Krell ships are numerous, very numerous. Perhaps we should request assistance, Ashira said carefully. The human fleet is still in this sector. The room fell silent. Then several officers began to laugh. Request help from the humans, one said. With their primitive weapons? What could they possibly do that our forces cannot? The Krell might be vulnerable to different types of weapons, Ashira pressed. Kinetic weapons, perhaps. The humans have extensive experience with— Enough, Velthar interrupted. We will handle this ourselves. The Velthari Empire does not need help from species who still throw rocks at their enemies. The meeting ended with orders to mobilize more ships. Ashira left, feeling a cold dread in her stomach. She had tried to warn them. They hadn't listened. That night, she made a decision that could be considered treason. She opened a secure channel to the Eternal Horizon and asked to speak with Captain Jiho privately. Captain, she said when his face appeared on her screen, I need to tell you something my superiors don't yet understand. Your weapons, your history, your way of war. I've studied it all. And I believe the Velthari have made a terrible mistake in underestimating your people. Jiho listened as she explained everything. Her research, her simulations, her fears about the Krell. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Thank you for telling me this, Princess, he finally said. But why? Why risk your position to warn us? Because, Ashira said, I have a feeling that very soon you will be the ones coming to help us. And I want at least one person in the Velthari Empire to understand what you truly are. Not primitive. Not inferior. Just different. And perhaps in some ways more prepared for real war than we ever were. The distress signal came at 0400 hours ship time. Lieutenant Mireille was on watch when the Velthari transmission burst through the communication systems, overriding all other channels. The priority code indicated an empire-wide emergency. She woke Captain Jiho immediately. Show me, he said, arriving on the bridge within minutes, his uniform only half fastened. The message was brief and desperate. 3 more Velthari colonies had gone dark. 5 military fleets had engaged the Krell and suffered massive casualties. The Velthari Empire, which had dominated this region of space for centuries, was losing. They're not asking for help, Mireille noted, reviewing the transmission. This is just an information broadcast. Pride, Jiho said quietly. They'd rather die than admit they need us. He turned to the communications officer. Get me Admiral Choi, and find out where Princess Ashira is. Admiral Choi Taejin commanded Earth's defense fleet from the battleship Indomitable. When Jiho's message reached him, he was already preparing to move. Earth's military command had been monitoring the situation closely. They knew an opportunity when they saw one, though none of them took pleasure in the Velthari suffering. Captain Jiho. The Admiral's weathered face appeared on screen. I'm bringing 7 ships. We'll reach your position in 30 hours. Until then, gather what intelligence you can about these Krell. Science Officer Nam Yuna had already begun her analysis. She worked in the Eternal Horizons laboratory, surrounded by holographic displays of Krell biology pieced together from long-range scans and Velthari combat footage. They're fascinating, she said, though her tone suggested she found them more horrifying than fascinating, insect-like but with some crustacean features. And look at this armor. She magnified an image of Krell shell plating. It's biological but incredibly dense. And here's the interesting part. It seems to adapt. The Velthari combat footage shows the armor getting more resistant to plasma weapons after repeated exposure. Dr. Hajin joined her, studying the data with intense focus. Reactive evolution. Like bacteria developing antibiotic resistance but much faster. The Krell have been fighting energy-based weapons for so long that they evolved specifically to counter them. Which means, Jiho asked, though he already suspected the answer. Which means they've probably never faced kinetic weapons, Yuna said. Their armor adapted to dissipate heat and deflect plasma. But a solid projectile moving fast enough? She smiled grimly. That's basic physics. Force equals mass times acceleration. No amount of adaptation changes that equation. A private communication request came through. Princess Ashira calling on an encrypted channel. Jiho took it in his ready room. "Captain," she said, and he could see the exhaustion on her face. "It's worse than the reports say. The Krell aren't just attacking randomly. They're coordinated, intelligent, and our forces can't stop them." "Your commanders will reach out eventually," Jiho said. "They'll have to." "No," Ashira shook her head. "They won't, not officially. That's why I'm contacting you. I'm formally requesting human military assistance under my authority as a member of the royal family." Jiho raised an eyebrow. "Does your father know about this?" "He will," she said, "after it's done." "Captain, I've seen the projections. If we don't stop the Krill in the next week, they'll reach the inner colonies. Billions will die. I don't care about politics or pride anymore. I care about saving lives. Admiral Choi is already on his way," Jiho assured her. "But Princess, you need to prepare your military commanders. We'll need to work together, and that means they'll have to accept our methods." 30 hours later, the human fleet arrived. 7 warships, smaller and less impressive than their Valthari counterparts, but built with purpose. The Indomitable led the formation, followed by 4 frigates, a support carrier, and the Eternal Horizon. High Commander Velthar met with Admiral Choi via holographic communication. The meeting was tense from the start. "We did not request your presence," Velthar said stiffly. "Princess Ashira did," Choi replied calmly. "Under her royal authority. But if you'd prefer we leave—" "No." The word came from another Valthari officer, one whose armor bore signs of recent combat. "No, we need all the help we can get." "High Commander, I've lost 3 ships this week. 3. The Krell are tearing through our defenses like they're nothing." Velthar's pride warred with necessity. "Necessity won. Very well. But understand this, Admiral. You follow our battle plan. Your weapons may work differently than ours, but we have centuries of military experience." Colonel Bei Jiwoo, commander of the Human Special Operations Forces, spoke up. "With respect, High Commander, your military experience is against technologically inferior enemies. The Krell aren't inferior. They're specialized. They evolved to fight energy weapons. We evolved to fight everything." "Evolved?" Velthar's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" "He means," Princess Ashira said, entering the communication, "that human weapons were designed through constant warfare. War against equals. The Krell have never faced weapons like theirs." Velthar looked at the princess with something between surprise and anger. "You speak for them now?" "I speak for survival," she said firmly. "I've studied human military history, Commander. They know war in ways we've forgotten, or perhaps ways we never learned." The debate continued for another hour before a compromise was reached. The human fleet would join the Valthari forces at the colony of Tharsis Prime, where the Krell were massing for a major assault. The humans would be allowed to engage the enemy their way, but overall strategy would remain under Valthari command. It was a fragile agreement, born from desperation rather than trust. Science Officer Yuna worked with her Valthari counterparts to share intelligence about the Krell. The Valthari scientists were skeptical at first, but as they reviewed the analysis, their doubts faded. "You're suggesting their armor is almost useless against kinetic impact?" one Valthari scientist asked. "Not useless," Yuna corrected, "just not optimized. They evolved to handle energy weapons. A solid projectile with enough force will crack that shell like an egg. Primitive but effective," the Valthari scientist mused. "I'm beginning to understand." Preparations moved quickly. Engineer Daehyun worked around the clock with his team, ensuring every weapon system was at peak performance. They loaded the frigates with thousands of railgun rounds and restocked missile batteries. The weapons were simple, cheap to produce, and deadly. "We're ready," Daehyun reported to Admiral Choi. "Every system is green." Pilot Shin Hyejin prepared her fighter squadron aboard the support carrier. Her small craft were armed with old-fashioned cannons, rapid-fire weapons that threw solid projectiles at incredible rates. Next to the sleek Valthari fighters with their plasma weapons, the human craft looked like antiques, but appearances, as the galaxy was about to learn, could be deceiving. Captain Jiho stood on his bridge as the combined fleet prepared to jump to Tharsis Prime. He thought about the upcoming battle, about all the variables and unknowns. War was never certain, but he felt confident in his crew, in their weapons, in their training. "Captain," Mireille said. "Incoming message from Princess Ashira. Personal channel." Jiho nodded for her to put it through. "Captain," Ashira's voice was soft, almost hesitant. "Thank you. For coming. For helping despite how my people treated you. We're not helping because of how you treated us, Jiho said. We're helping because it's the right thing to do. That's what humanity learned from all our wars, Princess. We learned that in the end, we're all just people trying to survive. The species doesn't matter. I hope my people learn that lesson, she said. Before it's too late. The fleet jumped to faster-than-light speed, racing toward Tharsis Prime. Toward battle. Toward the moment when the Valthari would finally understand what they had mocked. In his quarters, Dr. Hagen reviewed human military doctrine one more time. There was a quote from an ancient human general that seemed appropriate for what was coming. He spoke it aloud to the empty room. The supreme art of war is to defeat the enemy without fighting, but when you must fight, fight with everything you have. Tomorrow the humans would show the Krell what that meant, and the Valthari would watch in shock as primitive weapons proved that sometimes the old ways were old for a reason. They worked. Tharsis Prime hung in space like a blue jewel, its 3 moons casting long shadows across the planet's surface. 10 million Valthari lived on the colony below. Above them, in orbital space, the Krell swarm gathered like a dark cloud. Sensors reading over 200 Krell vessels, Lieutenant Mirai reported from her station. They're forming up for an assault on the planet. Admiral Choi studied the tactical display on the Indomitable's bridge. The Krell ships were organic things, grown rather than built, covered in the same adaptive armor that protected their individual warriors. They moved in patterns that reminded him of insects swarming toward food. Valthari fleet status? He asked. 12 capital ships, 30 escorts, came the response. They're positioning themselves between the Krell and the planet. Standard defensive formation? And us? We're on the flank, sir. The Valthari put us out of the main battle line. Choi smiled without humor. They still don't trust us very well. We'll show them what flank support can do. On the Valthari flagship, High Commander Velthar watched the human ships take position. They looked so small, so insignificant next to his battle cruisers. Part of him still doubted they would be useful. But Princess Ashira stood beside him, and her presence reminded him that pride had already cost too many lives. Human Admiral, he opened a channel. You will provide fire support. Target any Krell vessels that break through our main line. Do not engage independently. Understood, Commander, Choi replied. But his tone suggested he had his own plans. The Krell attacked at dawn planetside time. Their ships surged forward in a wave of chitin and biological weapons. The Valthari opened fire immediately, their plasma lances cutting bright lines across the darkness of space. The initial barrage was impressive. Plasma bolts struck Krell ships, melting through armor and causing massive damage. But as Science Officer Yuna had predicted, the Krell adapted quickly. Their armor began to glow, dispersing the heat. Ships that should have been destroyed limped onward, their hulls scarred but functional. Their adaptation is faster than projected, a Valthari officer reported nervously. Plasma effectiveness down 30% and dropping. Veltar's hands gripped his command chair. Increase power. Maximum yield. The Valthari ships poured more energy into their weapons. For a moment it worked. Krell ships began to explode. But the swarm kept coming, and with each attack they grew more resistant. Commander, Princess Ashira said quietly, it's time. Let the humans engage. Velthar hesitated only a moment. Then he opened the channel. Human fleet, you are cleared to engage at will. Finally, Admiral Choi said. All ships open fire. Show them what we brought. The human frigates moved forward, their railguns charging. These weapons didn't use exotic energy or advanced physics. They were simply magnetic accelerators that threw solid metal at incredible speeds. Old technology. Simple technology. Deadly technology. The first railgun volley hit the Krell line like a hammer. Solid tungsten rods, moving at a significant fraction of light speed, punched through the adaptive armor as if it wasn't there. The Krell's biological defenses, so effective against energy weapons, did nothing against pure kinetic force. Krell ships exploded. Not from heat or energy dissipation, but from the simple physics of too much force applied too quickly. Armor cracked. Hulls shattered. Organic matter scattered into the void. On the Valthari flagship, officers stared at their displays in stunned silence. What? What did they just do? Someone whispered. They threw rocks, Ashira said, her voice full of wonder. Very, very fast rocks, and the Krell have no defense against it. Lieutenant Mirai stood at her weapons console on the eternal horizon. a cold smile on her face. Firing missiles. Full spread. The human missiles streaked through space, their chemical propellant leaving bright trails. They weren't as fast as plasma, but they didn't need to be. They were smart, capable of adjusting their course, designed to hunt targets through any amount of evasion, and their warheads were explosive, not energy-based. When they hit Krell ships, they detonated with brutal efficiency, tearing through hulls and rupturing internal organs. The Krell's adaptive armor tried to respond, tried to compensate, but it had no answer for explosions that simply ripped matter apart through expansion and pressure. Pilot Hyejin led her squadron into the thick of battle. Her fighter was small and fast, armed with rapid-fire cannons that had been old technology when humans first reached space, but old didn't mean ineffective. Stay tight, she told her pilots. Target the smaller Krell ships. Don't give them time to adapt. Her cannons opened up, firing hundreds of rounds per second. Solid bullets tore through Krell fighters, punching holes faster than their biology could heal. Other human pilots followed her lead, weaving through the battle space with practiced ease. The Valthari had never seen human pilots fight before. They flew with a recklessness that seemed suicidal, getting close to enemy ships, dodging weapons fire with narrow margins. But that recklessness was calculated. Every human pilot had trained for combat against other human pilots, where the difference between victory and death was often measured in milliseconds. The Krell were dangerous, but they weren't prepared for prey that fought back this effectively. The human weapons are incredibly effective, a Valthari tactical officer reported to Velthar. Enemy losses are accelerating. But Commander, some of our ships are in the line of fire. Human weapons don't discriminate like ours do. It was true. Plasma lances could be shut off instantly, their beams directed with perfect precision. But railgun rounds, once fired, traveled until they hit something. And human missiles, once locked on target, pursued with single-minded determination. Tell our ships to adjust their formations, Velthar ordered. Give the humans clear firing lanes. It went against all Valthari military doctrine. The less advanced force doesn't dictate tactics to the advanced force, but doctrine didn't matter when it wasn't working. The battle raged for 3 hours. The Krell kept coming, their numbers seemingly endless. But the human weapons kept firing, never slowing, never stopping. Railguns overheated and were cycled off to cool while others took over. Missile batteries emptied and were reloaded by automated systems designed for rapid replenishment. Colonel Bay commanded the boarding operations. When Krell ships got too close to the Valthari vessels, his Marines launched in small assault craft, carrying weapons that made the Valthari uncomfortable. Chemical propellant firearms, explosive charges, even-bladed weapons for close combat. These are barbaric, one Valthari officer commented watching the feeds. These are effective, Princess Ashira corrected. Watch. The Marines breached a damaged Krell ship. Inside, they moved with practiced precision, their weapons designed for exactly this kind of fighting. Close quarters, low visibility, enemies that could come from any direction. Sergeant O'Minho led his squad through the organic corridors of the Krell vessel. The walls pulsed with life and the air stank of alien biology. His rifle was loaded with explosive-tipped rounds, designed to cause maximum damage to biological targets. Contact front, someone called. Krell warriors charged down the corridor, their claws sharp enough to cut through metal. Minho's squad opened fire. The explosive rounds tore through chitin armor, dropping the aliens before they could close the distance. Clear, moving forward. They reached the ship's core, a pulsing mass of organic material that seemed to be both brain and engine. Minho planted explosive charges with practiced efficiency. Charges set. Everyone out, the Marines evacuated. 30 seconds later, the Krell ship exploded from the inside. Medical Officer Quan Jai worked in the Eternal Horizons medical bay, treating casualties from both human and Valthari ships. The Valthari wounded had been hesitant at first, unsure if human medicine could help them. But Jai didn't care about politics. She cared about saving lives. The physiology is different, but the principles are the same, she told her staff. Stop the bleeding. Stabilize the patient. Everything else we can figure out. A Valthari soldier watched her work on his injured comrade, his expression unreadable. You help us, he said slowly. Even after how we treated your people. Of course, Ji said, not looking up from her work. That's what doctors do. The tide of battle turned decisively. The Krell, faced with weapons they had no adaptation for, began to retreat. Their ships pulled back, disappearing into faster-than-light travel in a disorganized rout. On the Valthari flagship, cheers erupted from the crew. They had won. The colony was saved. But the cheers were mixed with stunned silence as everyone processed what they had just witnessed. High Commander Velthar stood slowly. He opened a channel to the human fleet. "Admiral Choi, on behalf of the Valthari Empire, I thank you. Your weapons were more effective than anticipated." "Our weapons did what they were designed to do," Choi replied. "Kill enemies efficiently, no matter how tough those enemies think they are." Velthar closed the channel and turned to Princess Ashira. The look on his face was complex, mixing shame with revelation. "You tried to tell me," he said quietly. "You tried to warn us, and I wouldn't listen." "Many wouldn't listen," Ashira said, "but perhaps now they will. Commander, the humans just saved 10 million Valthari lives with weapons we called primitive. I think it's time we reconsidered what we think we know about warfare." Later, as the fleets regrouped and began recovery operations, Captain Jiho walked through the 2 days after the battle. Princess Ashira stood in the conference room of the Eternal Horizon. She had requested this meeting personally, asking Captain Jiho and his senior staff to provide her with something that both fascinated and terrified her. "The complete truth about human military history. Are you certain you want to see this?" Dr. Hajan asked gently. "Some of it is difficult, even for us." "I need to understand," Ashira said firmly. "My people need to understand. We judged you based on our own experience, our own wars. But your wars were nothing like ours, were they?" "No," Captain Jiho said quietly. "They weren't." The lights dimmed. Holographic displays filled the room, and the lesson began. Dr. Hajin started at the beginning. "Humans have been at war since before we had written language. These are cave paintings from 30,000 years ago. See these figures? They're depicting a battle between tribes." Ashira studied the primitive images. Stick figures with spears. Simple, but the message was clear. "You fought each other even then?" "We've always fought each other," Hajin said. "For food, for territory, for resources, for ideas, for revenge. Humans can find reasons to fight about almost anything." The timeline advanced. Bronze Age armies clashing with swords and shields. Iron Age legions marching in perfect formation. Medieval knights in armor. Castles built specifically to withstand sieges. Each era brought new weapons, Hajin explained. And each weapon changed how we fought. The crossbow could pierce armor that swords couldn't. Gunpowder made castles obsolete. Every advance in offense required an advance in defense. And every advance in defense required a new offense to overcome it. "An endless cycle," Ashira said softly. "Yes, for thousands of years." The display shifted to more recent history. World War I trenches where millions died in mud and poison gas. World War II, with its tanks and planes and bombs that could level cities. The Cold War, where two human nations pointed enough nuclear weapons at each other to destroy the entire planet dozens of times over. Ashira watched footage of nuclear tests. Mushroom clouds rising into the sky. Cities turned to ash in seconds. Her hand trembled as she reached toward the hologram as if trying to touch something that terrified her. "You almost destroyed yourselves," she whispered. "Several times," Jiho confirmed. "We came closer than most people realize. There were moments when one person's decision, one miscommunication, one technical error could have ended our species. But you didn't. You survived." "We learned," Dr. Hajin said. "Eventually. We learned that total war leads only to total destruction. We learned to talk, to compromise, to find solutions other than violence. But Princess, we only learned those lessons after paying for them with rivers of blood." Science Officer Yuna pulled up new data. And all those wars, all that killing, produced something else. An understanding of warfare that no other species has ever needed. She showed Ashira chemical warfare data. Biological weapons. Electromagnetic pulses. Cyber weapons designed to cripple infrastructure without firing a shot. Psychological operations to break enemy morale. Information warfare to control narratives and perceptions. "We weaponized everything," Yuna said bluntly. "Chemistry, biology, physics, psychology, information itself. If it existed, we found a way to turn it into a weapon. Because we were fighting enemies exactly as smart as we were. Enemies who would do the same to us if we didn't do it first." Ashira felt something cold spreading through her chest. The weapons we saw at the battle. The railguns, the missiles, the explosives. Those are just the conventional weapons. "Yes," Jiho said. Those are what we use for standard combat. The weapons we're comfortable showing other species. What weapons aren't you comfortable showing? The room fell silent. The human officers exchanged glances. Finally, Jiho spoke. Should I tell her? He asked his crew. She needs to know, Lieutenant Mirai said. Better she hears it from us than discovers it later. Jiho nodded slowly. Princess, you need to understand something. When we demonstrated our weapons to your fleet, we showed you what we thought would be acceptable. Old technology, simple systems, nothing that would seem too threatening. We didn't show you everything. What didn't you show me? Biological weapons that can target specific genetic markers. Nanite swarms that can disassemble matter at the molecular level. Antimatter warheads that make nuclear weapons look like firecrackers. Computer viruses that can take control of enemy systems. Psychological conditioning that can break a person's will without ever touching them. Ashira stood very still. You have all of these things? We have the knowledge to build all of these things, Jiho said carefully. Some exist in limited quantities locked away in secure facilities. Others we keep as theoretical designs only. Knowledge preserved in case we ever need it, but hoping we never will. Why? Ashira demanded. Why create such terrible weapons? Because someone else might create them first, Dr. Hajin said quietly. That's the lesson we learned. In war against other humans, the side that holds back loses. The side that says we won't use that weapon because it's too cruel often finds itself facing an enemy with no such hesitation. So you became monsters to fight monsters? We became survivors, Mirai said, her voice hard. You need to understand, Princess. When the Valthari look at our weapons, you see primitive technology. When we look at our weapons, we see the cost. Every bullet represents someone who died to teach us how to make it better. Every tactical doctrine is written in the blood of soldiers who learned what worked by dying when something didn't. Engineer Daehyun pulled up technical specifications. Look at this. A simple assault rifle. Cheap to manufacture, easy to maintain. Reliable in almost any environment. Do you know how many iterations it took to reach this design? How many soldiers gave feedback? How many combat situations we studied? How many failures we had to overcome? Hundreds? Ashira guessed. Thousands. Over more than a century of development. And that's just for one weapon. Multiply that by every weapon system we have. Every tactic we use, every strategy in our military doctrine, all of it paid for with lives. Ashira sat down slowly. Her legs felt weak. And if the Valthari had attacked Earth when we first met you, the room grew very quiet. We would have defended ourselves, Jiho said finally, with everything we have. Every weapon we've never shown you. Every tactic we learned from thousands of years of warfare. Every bit of knowledge we gained from fighting enemies as intelligent and determined as ourselves. Would we have won? Jiho met her eyes. Eventually, probably. Your technology is better. Your ships are stronger. In a fair fight, the Valthari would dominate. But Princess, we've spent thousands of years learning how to make fights unfair. We'd have made you pay for every system, every planet, every kilometer of space. We'd have found your weaknesses and exploited them ruthlessly. We'd have used weapons you'd never seen. Tactics you'd never imagined, strategies that would seem insane until suddenly they worked. And we'd have kept fighting, Mirai added, even if you'd won every battle, even if you'd destroyed our fleets and occupied our worlds. Humans know how to fight from the shadows, how to make occupations expensive, how to turn victories into nightmares of guerrilla warfare, an insurgency that never ends. We'd have made sure that attacking Earth cost you more than any prize could possibly be worth, Dr. Hajin said. Because that's what we learned from all our wars. Sometimes you don't have to win. You just have to make the enemy regret starting the fight. Ashira put her head in her hands. Everything she thought she knew about warfare, about military power, about the nature of conflict was crumbling. The Valthari had based their entire military doctrine on the assumption that superior technology meant victory. But technology was only one factor in war, and perhaps she was beginning to realize not even the most important one. Show me more, she said, looking up. Show me everything. I need to understand what my people don't. For the next 6 hours, they walked her through human military history in detail. The strategies, the tactics, the weapons. But more than that, they showed her the thinking behind it all. The psychology of warfare, the understanding that war is not just about destroying the enemy, but about breaking their will to fight, about turning their strengths into weaknesses, about surviving long enough to see the other side make a mistake. They showed her human writings on war, Ancient texts thousands of years old that still guided military thinking. Concepts like asymmetric warfare, where the weaker force defeats the stronger through patience and strategy. Doctrines of deterrence, where the threat of retaliation prevents war from starting. Principles of total war, where entire societies mobilize for survival. You think about war differently than we do, Ashira said, as the lesson wound down. To the Valthari, war is an extension of politics. A tool to achieve objectives. But to humans, a war is a failure, Captain Jiho finished. A failure of diplomacy, of understanding, of peace. But when it comes, we commit to it absolutely. Because we learned that half measures in war lead only to longer wars and more deaths. Ashira stood and walked to the viewport. Outside, the Valthari fleet hung in space, proud and beautiful. But now when she looked at those ships, she saw them differently. She saw the assumptions built into their design, the arrogance of Neve. The imperial palace on the Valthari homeworld rose like a mountain of crystal and light. Princess Ashira had returned there 3 weeks after the Battle of Tharsis Prime, carrying with her a data drive containing everything she had learned about humanity. Her hands were steady as she walked into the council chamber, but her heart pounded with nervousness. Emperor Thalvon sat on the throne, his silver eyes watching his daughter with a mixture of pride and concern. Around the chamber, the most powerful members of Valthari society waited. Military commanders, scientific advisors, political leaders, all of them curious about what the young princess had learned during her time with the humans. You requested an urgent session of the full council, the emperor said. Speak, daughter. Tell us what has you so concerned. Ashira activated the holographic display. Images of human weapons filled the chamber. Railguns, missiles, nuclear warheads, and then carefully selected footage from Earth's history. Wars, battles, the weapons humanity had created to fight itself. Members of the council, she began, we have made a grave error in our assessment of humanity. They are not the primitive species we believed them to be. They are something far more dangerous. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some sounded amused. Others intrigued. Councillor Drath, who had dismissed Earth's application to the galactic community, spoke first. Princess, we appreciate your concern, but we have reviewed the humans' technology. Their weapons are centuries behind ours. This is simply fact. Their individual weapons are less advanced, Ashira agreed. But war is not won by the sophistication of weapons alone. It's won by doctrine, by strategy, by the will to use those weapons effectively. And in these areas, humanity far exceeds us. She pulled up data from the Battle of Tharsis Prime. The Krell had adapted to counter our plasma weapons. Our ships were suffering heavy casualties. Then the humans engaged with their primitive kinetic weapons. In 3 hours, they destroyed more Krell vessels than we had in 3 weeks. A lucky matchup, another counselor dismissed. The Krell happened to be vulnerable to kinetic weapons. This doesn't prove human superiority. It proves human adaptability, Ashira countered. They assessed the situation, identified the enemy's weakness, and exploited it ruthlessly. That's what they've been doing to each other for thousands of years. High Commander Velthar stood. To Ashira's surprise, he spoke in her support. The princess is correct. I have fought the humans alongside my fleet. Their tactics are unconventional but effective. Their weapons may be simple, but simplicity has advantages we've overlooked. You speak in their favor now? Drath's tone was accusing. After how you mocked them when we first met. I speak the truth now, Velthar said heavily. Something I should have done earlier. I underestimated them. We all did, and that underestimation nearly cost us Tharsis Prime. The debate intensified. Some counselors agreed that humanity deserved more respect. Others insisted the Valthari's technological superiority made them inherently superior. The argument grew heated until Emperor Thalvon raised his hand for silence. Princess Ashira, he said carefully. What exactly are you proposing? Grant humanity full membership in the galactic community, she said. Open trade relations. Share technology. Learn from them as they learn from us. And most importantly, never ever consider them as potential enemies. Why the last part? The Emperor asked. Ashira took a deep breath. Because they have weapons they didn't show us. Weapons that make nuclear warheads look primitive. Biological agents. Nanite swarms. Antimatter devices. And they have thousands of years of experience in total warfare against opponents exactly as intelligent as themselves. Father, if we ever fight humanity in a full war, we might win. But the cost would be catastrophic for both sides. The chamber fell silent. Then Counselor Drath laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the crystal walls. "You've been deceived," he said. "The humans have filled your head with stories to make themselves seem more threatening than they are. This is psychological warfare, Princess. They're manipulating you." "I've seen the evidence," Ashira said, her voice tight with frustration. "Historical records, combat footage, weapon specifications. They're not lying. Or they've fabricated clever lies," Drath insisted. "Princess, you're young, inexperienced. The humans took advantage of your naivety." Before Ashira could respond, new voices entered the debate. Other counselors, scientists who had worked with human engineers after the battle, military officers who had seen human weapons in action. Slowly, a picture emerged that supported Ashira's assessment, but the conservatives remained unconvinced. And more concerning, a faction began to argue for a different approach. "If the humans are as dangerous as the princess suggests," one military advisor said, "then we should act now while we still have the advantage. A preemptive strike to neutralize the threat." Ashira felt ice in her veins. "That would be madness. You'd be starting a war we don't need to fight." "Better to fight it now than wait until they're stronger," the advisor argued. "If they're truly as warlike as you claim, conflict is inevitable. We should strike first." The debate raged for hours. Finally, the Emperor called for order. "This council is divided. I will take the princess's report under advisement. In the meantime, we will increase surveillance of human space and military capabilities. We will not take hostile action, but neither will we rush into an alliance." It was a compromise that satisfied no one. Ashira left the chamber exhausted and frustrated. She had tried to warn them. Some had listened. Others had dismissed her. And worst of all, some now saw humanity as a threat that needed to be eliminated. While the Valthari Council debated, something else was happening across the galaxy. Word of the Battle of Tharsis Prime had spread. Other species had heard about the human weapons that defeated the Krell, about the tactics that shocked the Valthari, about a species that was technologically inferior but militarily formidable. Ambassador Kim Subin found herself suddenly very busy. Her office on Earth's orbital station received dozens of communication requests from alien civilizations. Some wanted to open trade, others wanted military alliances. A few wanted to purchase human weapons. "This is unexpected," she told General Lim Wanshik during one of their daily briefings. 3 weeks ago, nobody would talk to us. Now everyone wants to be our friend." "Fear is a powerful motivator," Lim said dryly. "They're afraid of the Krell. They're afraid of any species that might threaten them. And now they see us as either a useful ally or a potential threat they want to neutralize through friendship. And which are we? Both, probably. Ambassador, we need to be very careful here. We've gone from being ignored to being the center of attention. That's dangerous. Other species might decide we're too dangerous to be allowed to grow stronger." Subin nodded grimly. "I've been thinking the same thing. We need to show that we're not a threat, that we're peaceful, while maintaining our ability to defend ourselves," Lim added. "The moment we look weak, someone will test us." It was a delicate balance. Earth's diplomatic corps worked overtime, negotiating trade agreements and cultural exchanges. They emphasized humanity's peaceful intentions while carefully not appearing weak or vulnerable. But not everyone in the galaxy saw humanity's rise as positive. Princess Ashira discovered the conspiracy by accident. She was reviewing military communications when she noticed encrypted messages between several high-ranking Valthari officers. Messages that shouldn't have been encrypted. Using her royal access codes, she broke the encryption. What she found made her blood run cold. A faction within the Valthari military was planning a preemptive strike against Earth. They had convinced themselves that humanity posed an existential threat to Valthari dominance. They planned to attack Earth's orbital defenses, destroy the human fleet, and force humanity to surrender before they could become stronger. The attack was scheduled for 6 weeks from now. Barely enough time to prepare, Ashira faced a choice that could be considered treason. She could report this to her father and the council, but the conspirators included members of the imperial family. The revelation would cause a political crisis. Or she could warn the humans directly, violating every law about sharing military intelligence with non-Valthari species. She thought about Captain Jiho, about Dr. Hajin and science officer Yuna, about the human soldiers who had fought and died to save Valthari colonies from the Krell, about the medical officer who had treated Valthari wounded without hesitation. Then she opened a secure channel to Earth. Captain Jiho received the message in his quarters aboard the Eternal Horizon. Princess Ashira's face appeared on his screen, and he could see the fear in her eyes. Captain, I'm about to commit an act that my people would call treason. But I have no choice. A faction within our military is planning to attack Earth. You have 6 weeks to prepare. She transmitted all the intelligence she had. Fleet positions, attack plans, weapons systems, everything the conspirators had prepared. Why are you doing this?
Jiho asked, stunned. Because it's wrong, Ashira said simply.
And because you saved us from the Krell. I won't stand by while my people repay that kindness with betrayal. Captain, I'm sending you everything I have. Use it, prepare, and please find a way to stop this without total war. What will happen? Princess Ashira had never been to Earth before. The planet hung before her small shuttle like a blue and white jewel, so similar to the Valthari homeworld yet somehow more vibrant, more alive. She had fled her world in secret, knowing that her transmission to Captain Jiho would soon be discovered. Better to seek asylum with the humans than face execution for treason. General Lim Wanshik met her at the orbital station, his weathered face showing respect rather than suspicion. Princess Ashira, welcome to Earth. Your warning gave us time to prepare. You may have prevented a war, or simply delayed it, Ashira said quietly. My people discovered my actions 3 days ago. I am now officially declared a traitor to the Empire. Whatever happens next, I cannot go home. Then Earth will be your home for as long as you need, Lim said. Come. There's much you need to see. Engineer Daehyun and Science Officer Yuna gave Ashira a tour that no alien had ever received before. They took her to human history museums, places where humanity displayed its own past without pride or shame, simply as truth. She walked through halls showing ancient weapons, stone axes, bronze swords, medieval armor. Each display explained not just the technology but the context. The wars fought, the lives lost, the lessons learned. We don't celebrate this, Yuna said as they stood before a display about World War II. We remember it. All the death. All the suffering. We keep these memories alive so we never forget the cost of war. Ashira stopped before a memorial wall. Names. Millions of names. Human soldiers who had died in conflicts across the centuries. She reached out, touching the carved letters. You mourn them, she said softly. Even after all this time. Even knowing that war created the weapons that saved my people from the Krell. Especially because of that, Daehyun said. We know what our weapons can do. We know the price they exact. That's why we try so hard to avoid using them. She saw nuclear test sites, now preserved as monuments to humanity's brush with self-destruction. She saw museums dedicated to peace, showing the diplomatic agreements that had ended conflicts. She learned about human philosophy, about the constant debate between those who prepared for war and those who worked for peace. You're a species of contradictions, she told them at the end of the tour. You build terrible weapons but hate using them. You're incredibly good at war, but desperately want peace. How do you live with that tension? Carefully, Yuna said. Very carefully. The crisis came faster than anyone expected. The Krell, having regrouped after their defeat at Tharsis Prime, launched a massive invasion, not at the Valthari Empire this time, but at both Valthari and human space simultaneously. They had learned, they had adapted, and they were coming with overwhelming force. The distress signals flooded in from both sides of the galaxy. Krell swarms attacking human colonies. Krell fleets striking Valthari worlds. It was a coordinated assault designed to prevent either species from helping the other. Emperor Thalvan faced an impossible choice. His empire was under attack. His military was already strained, and the only force capable of helping was humanity, the same species his own generals had been planning to attack. The emergency transmission came directly to Earth's government. The Emperor himself appeared on screen, his pride clearly warring with necessity. People of Earth, he said, the words clearly difficult. The Valthari Empire faces a threat we cannot overcome alone. The Krell have launched attacks across both our territories. I am formally requesting military assistance under the emergency protocols of the galactic community. We're not members of the galactic community, Ambassador Subin pointed out. You rejected our application. I know, Thalvan said. That was a mistake, one of many we have made regarding your species. But setting aside politics, billions of lives are at stake, both Valthari and human. Will you help us? The transmission ended. Earth's leaders gathered to debate. Some argued for letting the Valthari suffer, payback for their arrogance. Others pointed out that if the Valthari fell, humanity would face the Krell alone. General Lim cut through the debate with characteristic bluntness. We help them, not because we like them, not because they've treated us well, but because it's the right thing to do, and because we're better than they think we are. The decision was made. Earth would help, but there was a problem. Princess Ashira, now living on Earth as a political refugee, had information that could save both species. She knew Valthari military codes, defense positions, fleet movements, information that would be invaluable in coordinating a joint defense. She also knew that using this information meant betraying her people again. Even if it was to save them, Captain Jiho found her in the observation deck of the military headquarters staring at the stars. Princess, we need your help. I know, she said. You need Valthari military intelligence, and I have it. But Captain, if I give you this information, I'm betraying my father, my emperor. Everything I was raised to protect. You're not betraying them, Jiho said gently. You're saving them. There's a difference. Is there? My people won't see it that way. Jiho stood beside her, looking at the same stars. When I was young, I wondered why we studied military history so much, why we kept such careful records of our wars. My instructor told me something I've never forgotten. He said we study war not to glorify it, but to remember its cost. We remember so that when the time comes to fight, we know exactly what we're doing. And when the time comes to make peace, we remember why peace matters more. You're saying I should help even though it means betraying my oath? I'm saying you should help because it's the right thing to do. And because you've already proven you're willing to choose what's right over what's easy. That transmission you sent us, the one that got you branded a traitor, that saved both our species from a war we didn't need to fight. Ashira closed her eyes. Then she nodded. I'll help. Give me access to your tactical systems. The combined fleet was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Human warships flying alongside Valthari cruisers. Human fighters coordinating with Valthari interceptors. Two species who had almost gone to war, now fighting side by side. Admiral Choi commanded the joint fleet from the Indomitable. High Commander Velthar served as his second, a position that would have been unthinkable weeks ago. Princess Ashira, operating from Earth, provided intelligence and tactical coordination. The Battle of the Binary Stars, as it would later be called, raged for 4 days. The Krell had come with the largest force they had ever assembled. But they faced an enemy they hadn't prepared for. Two species working together, combining advanced Valthari technology with brutal human tactics. Captain Jiho led the Eternal Horizon into the thick of combat, his railguns tearing through Krell armor while Valthari plasma lances provided covering fire. Lieutenant Mirai coordinated missile strikes with Valthari beam weapons, creating devastating combinations. Pilot Hyejin's squadron flew in formation with Valthari fighters. The aliens marveled at how the human pilots could predict their movements, work as a team without constant communication. It was something humans had learned from centuries of aerial combat. The Valthari, who had never needed such skills, learned quickly. Colonel Bay's Marines boarded damaged Krell ships alongside Valthari shock troops. At first, the Valthari soldiers were skeptical of the humans' simple weapons. Then they saw how effectively they worked in close quarters, how chemical propellant weapons never failed even in electromagnetic interference, how explosive charges could breach doors that energy weapons couldn't affect quickly enough. The tide turned on the third day. The Krell, facing coordinated resistance from two species with very different fighting styles, began to falter. They had adapted to Valthari weapons. They had learned to counter human tactics, but they couldn't adapt to both at once. On the fourth day, the Krell fleet broke and retreated. The combined human-Valthari force had achieved what neither could have done alone: victory. The aftermath was complex. Casualties on both sides had been severe. Ships were damaged. Soldiers were wounded. But they had survived. Emperor Thalvon traveled to Earth personally to thank Princess Ashira. The meeting took place in the same observation deck where Jiho had convinced her to help. "Daughter," the Emperor said, and Ashira was surprised to hear emotion in his voice. "I come to pardon your actions, and to thank you. You were branded a traitor for trying to save us. History will remember you differently." "I don't need history to remember me," Ashira said. I just needed to do what was right. Thalavon turned to General Lim and Admiral Choi. I also come to formally apologize to humanity. We judged you by your technology. We called your weapons primitive. We mocked your methods. We were fools. You were inexperienced, Lim corrected gently. There's a difference. The Veltari never had to fight for survival against peers. You never developed the military doctrine that desperation creates. That's not a flaw, Emperor. In many ways, it's a blessing. A blessing that nearly cost us everything, Thalavon said. If Princess Ashira hadn't warned you about the conspiracy, if you hadn't chosen to help us despite how we treated you, he paused. I would like to formally invite humanity to join the galactic community. With full membership and all rights. No more probation. No more testing. You've earned your place. We accept, Ambassador Subin said.